So, as you know, today is the presidential debate. And as I said, I'm going to predict the future. It's going to be a fucking disaster. But today's topic isn't about the presidential debates, not at all, because I'm sure a lot of you are sick to death of everything that's going on in the world. However, it is important, and though we're not going to be talking about the presidential debates, this has sparked in me the need to discuss a new future and what a new future of humanity could look like, where we don't have to deal with all of this bullshit. Because, for one thing, right now, think about how ridiculous it is in America during these elections, where we have to figure out, when you're going to cast your vote, it's like, oh, I'm going to vote for who's the least terrible. You think about how crazy that is, having to choose between who's the least terrible? Don't you want to live in a world where you can pick between those who are the best? Wouldn't that be great if you could vote for, different people? And the hard thing to decide isn't like, oh man, who's the least terrible here? But who's the best? Like, oh man, it's so hard to decide because they're all so great. Which one is the best? Wouldn't that be nice? But the point is, with these elections and everything, it doesn't matter who wins, because the rich elite will remain in control regardless of the outcome of the election. Of course, it still matters who wins in a small scale. But when you're looking at the big picture, when you're looking at the world as a whole, ultimately, whoever gets voted in, the world's not going to change. Because the rich elite are those who control the world, and you can't vote them in or out. Sure, you can vote for the president, but you can't vote for the rich elite. The rich elite are in power. Can you have a say when they're in their boardroom meetings? And, no, you can't. They're in power, and they're entrenched, and they control the world through that, and they can pass on their vast wealth through generation, and continue to control the world, and they are in their ivory tower, and you can't touch them. So they are the real controllers of the world. And I want to, in this, what we're going to be talking about today is envisioning a new future. And imagining what a brilliant new future could look like. A wonderful world, in contrast to this terrible world that we live in today. Because humanity lies on a razor's edge right now. It's walking on a razor's edge where humanity has the option of diverging into two paths. There are two choices here. And the first choice is that the rich elite remain in control and tighten their grip on humanity. And as time goes by, and not even a lot of time, they continue to control the world. As technology develops, imagine as technology develops as well, and you can get, sort of human upgrades and things like that. Well, guess who's going to be able to afford them? The super rich. You're going to get, you're going to ultimately create this sort of class of sort of superhumans where not only are, they above and beyond you because of wealth, but also because of what they can afford. And it would just create an even larger gap between the elite and the rest of us. And that's one trajectory of the world where the elite just continue to control their grip on humanity, and you get a dystopian nightmare, a dystopian future, and you're having a little taste of that right now. 2020 is a little taste of what would be to come in this dystopian nightmare. We live in a dystopian nightmare right now already, but 2020 is just a little, it's sort of the appetizer of what you get when the elite are in control. And ultimately, what would this lead to? Well, ultimately, this would lead to the downfall of humanity and the destruction of everything. They would control the world for a while, but look, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about evolution. They don't give a shit about you. They don't give a shit about the collective. They don't give a shit about the earth. They don't give a shit about global warming. They don't give a shit about anything. So ultimately, this will lead to destruction. So that's one path humanity has to take. But then there's this other path. And this is the path that we choose as Hyperions. And this is a beautiful and brilliant new future. And this is what I want to really talk about today. What that new future could look like. And what we're striving and aiming to build. And how we can bring that from an idea to actualization. Because here's a really important thing that I want you guys to understand. Ideas change the world. Everything starts out as an idea. People always think, you guys talk so much. How are you going to change the world? How are you going to change? It's the idea. This is why we're a revolution of consciousness. Because once we have everyone on the same page and raise them up to that level of consciousness, and they have that idea as well, then we can manifest it and bring it into the world. So right now, each and every one of us has that seed of a new world, of new Terra in our minds right now. We have that seed right there, and we're ready to bring it forth. And we need to sort of spread these seeds so we can bring it forth all across the world. And if you think about it, I love the painter metaphor. A painter has the idea of the painting in their mind, but it doesn't actualize until they bring it out and actually paint on the canvas. But you need both. You need the idea, and you need the canvas, and you need to actually paint. If you're missing one or the other, well, you're not really an artist, are you? If you just simply have an idea in your mind and you never bring it out, you haven't created anything. But if you don't have that idea, and all you have is a canvas and paint, you're just going to get scribbles. And that's the problem with the world today. It's just scribbles. Because there's no idea, there's no grand unifying idea. No one is at the level of consciousness. No one is an artist. No one has that seed in their mind of what they want to create. That's why you get just scribbles instead of a beautiful painting. Because the rich who control the world, what do they want to do with the world? Just get richer. Just make more money. Great. What do so many people who get into positions of power for? Why? Because they just want more power. Look at all the disputes, like Russia, North Korea, and the United States, and it's all just power hungry. It's dick measurement. Who has the biggest dick? And how ridiculous is this? And that's why you get just scribbles, because there's no brilliant, beautiful, unifying idea that resides in the mind to create a beautiful future and a beautiful painting. Humanity has a choice, and one of the choices is, the destruction of everything we know, and a dystopian nightmare is the rich elite control everything and drive the earth into the ground. But let's set that aside for now and think about the future that we want to actualize. The future that we want to actualize. And we've talked about the end of history before, but I'm just going to touch on it just a moment because it's an important concept. And this is where we reach for the end of history. And now, what exactly is the end of history? The end of history isn't a bad thing, it's a good thing. All right, so the end of history is basically when we reach a system that we no longer have to be fighting over for what the perfect system is and fighting for survival, and rather we can start on actually living and enjoying life rather than fighting for survival. So the end of history is actually not really an end, it's an end of something, but it's the beginning of actually being able to live and enjoy life. Like for example, Fukuyama thinks that capitalism is the end of history. Now what does that mean? So like according to Fukuyama, capitalism is basically the best system possible, it's as good as it gets. And so he calls it the end of history because you don't need another system. But you see how there's all these different competing systems out there, like capitalism, communism, socialism, etc., etc. The end of history is when you get to a system where you no longer have to look for a better system. It works very well, it's the best, and then we can focus on living and enjoying life rather than, all this fighting. So let me put this in terms of Hyperianism, because what's really important to understand about Hyperianism is that the end of history, for a system to be able to, for us to be able to enter in to the end of history, we need a Hyperion meritocracy. And why is Hyperion meritocracy a system that will lead to that? Because for a system to be the best, the final system, it has to have two elements. And none of the systems today have these two elements. And these two elements are that it must be teleological and dialectical. And none of the systems today have both those elements. And so none of the systems today can lead us to the end of history. So what are these two systems, the two elements, teleological and dialectical? Teleological means goal-oriented, and dialectical means evolving. So the system itself, the Hyperion meritocracy, incorporates the dialectic within it, which means it itself is a system of evolution and change. When you look at other systems like, socialism or capitalism or whatever, they don't have this dialectical element of opposites unified within it. So the first thing about Hyperion meritocracy is it implements the dialectic, which means it's a system of evolution and change that incorporates opposites within it. And that's really important because that way that system can evolve and adapt. You don't want to have a static, unmoving system because life is motion, life is movement. And as we evolve and grow, we're going to have different needs, we're going to need different ways of living, so it has to be able to evolve and grow dialectically. And extremely important, the other element is teleological. It must be teleological. What does teleology mean? It means goal-oriented. And you can sort of understand this like a seed. What is a seed teleologically strives to become the flower. So teleology means that within the system there is an overarching and unifying goal. And what goal do none of these other systems have any goals? Again, what are the goals? None really. What's the goal? What is the goal of capitalism? I don't know. What? So you can buy stuff at the mall and watch Netflix? Like what? There's no overarching unifying goal. So Hyperion meritocracy incorporates the dialectic and incorporates teleology, which means there's a goal. And what is that goal? The goal is to raise each and every one of its citizens into a divine status, to create its citizens into becoming gods and goddesses. So that is do you see how now the system isn't just random? It's not just about survival. It has a purpose and it has a goal. And that system isn't, it's not so you can it's not about buying shit. It's not about making the rich richer. It's about raising up each and every single one of its citizens to actualize their potential and become the very best they can possibly be until we literally have a divine planet, a society of the divine. And what greater goal, what greater teleological striving could you have than divinity itself? And so this is why the ultimate system that we are reaching for and aiming for and wish to implement is dialectical, it's evolving, and it's teleological. It has a divine goal embedded within it. And imagine living in such a world where it's no longer just about survival, because that's what, once we get to the end of history, no longer is it about surviving, but it's about thriving. Until we get to that end of history, it's about survival. Right? That's the sort of world that we live in right now. Oh man, do I have enough, money to buy food and pay rent and have a roof over my head and have enough to eat? It's about surviving. But once we reach that end of history, where we have that system that's teleological, dialectical, meritocratic, then it's no longer about survival, and we enter into a new phase of humanity where it's about thriving and reaching our divine status and becoming divine. And I mean, I really want you to think about what a beautiful world that will be, where we're no longer, judging people based on the color of their skin or homophobia or anything like this. Like, who cares? It's so childish, so stupid, so primitive. We don't have to worry about putting food on the table. We don't have to worry about putting a roof on over our heads, but rather we are now focused on becoming divine, both individually and collectively. And a really important thing to understand about this is in order to reach this, we have to have a higher level of consciousness. We have to start implementing a new way of thinking. And that's why I always emphasize these, the different perspectives of avatar, monadic, and absolute. Avatar, monadic, and absolute. Because right now, this is just an avatar world. People only look at themselves as bodies, and that's it. Commodities, physical, material. That's why capitalism is so popular, because it's an avatar perspective. But this is why we need all three. We need the, incorporating into our new world, we need all three perspectives. We need the perspective of the avatar, of course we need that, and that we have these physical bodies, they have needs, and we should be able to meet them and whatnot. So the avatar is important. But we also need the monadic perspective to see that our avatars are just vehicles, and what we truly are eternal minds that have the capacity to become gods. We are all God seeds. That's what we are. We're God seeds. Monads, us, souls, each and every one of us are God seeds. We aren't gods yet, but we are gods in ourselves, in that we have the potential ready to come out and bloom and become actual. Just like seeds are, seeds to become a flower, we monads are the seeds to become gods. And each and every one of us can do that, can actualize that. And that's why we need that society, that world culture, to be able to help us to be able to bloom and grow and survive. Right now, you're barely, you're struggling, and there might be a little sprout starting to sprout up, and then you have a weed come on over and choke you out, right? Like, it's all about just a struggle for survival. But when we have that new world, it's like building that perfect garden, that perfect system where we can finally begin to achieve what we will become. And an important element of this is something that I really want to touch on. In order to do this, we need what's known as a diverse monoculture. And a diverse monoculture means that underneath everything, we're united on a common goal and a common understanding, but we can express it in diverse ways. And this is the difference between, say, multiculturalism and a diverse monoculture. And you might think, well, isn't multiculturalism good? And on the surface, it sounds like a really good thing, right? Like, oh yeah, accept all cultures and whatnot. But the important thing to understand that what's dangerous about it is that there are really, really hateful ideologies out there, right? There are certain mainstream religions that are extremely homophobic, right? There are certain ways of thinking that are very, very violent. There are certain ways of thinking that are very, very aggressive. So that's when it becomes dangerous, and it's no longer just about expression, but you're inhibiting other people's growth, right? So what a diverse monoculture is about is it means that underneath everything, we're all united under a common understanding that we are all eternal minds, that we are all one within, the absolute perspective, and that we all have each other's back and we're looking out for each other, and that we are all divine. And that's what underlies and connects us together. That's where the monoculture comes in. But diversity means it can express itself in many, many, many different ways. Right? And then this is where you get the brilliant rainbow of colors, where we can all express this in many different ways. Be it the way we dress, the music we play, the rituals that we do, the customs that people have, right? That's where the beautiful diversity comes in. But we're all united underneath it all, and we don't have any of that, irrational hatred, like, some certain ideologies or mainstream religions will have, like, say, homophobia or again, sexism or something like that. So underneath it all, we're all united. We're all there for each other. We all have a common understanding of living together in peace and harmony, but then it can be expressed in diverse and beautiful ways. And that's what's really important to understand, because that's where we have that brilliant, sort of rainbow going on, where all of our individuality, and that can be expressed again through the way we dress and different customs that we may have and certain things like that. So that's something really important to understand. And I got a little off track. I talked about the avatar perspective and the monadic perspective, but I forgot to talk about the absolute perspective. All right, so the avatar perspective is the perspective where it's you as a body, which is important. Then the monadic perspective, where we understand that the individual is important and that we are all God's seeds, and we are need that society to bring that out and nurture that. And then the absolute perspective is realizing that from the perspective of the absolute and all reality, that we form an interconnected system. And from the perspective of that interconnected system, we are all one from that perspective, from the absolute perspective. And the reason why that is so important is because that's when you realize that my evolution is bound up with your evolution, and we are reflections of each other. And that's when you really start to get beautiful unity and harmony. Because even if you only have the monadic perspective, you can get conflict there, right? Because you're like, what if you're like, well, I want to be the best God, so fuck you. And you could even get, division there, right? But when you have the absolute perspective, you realize that, from that perspective, we are reflections of each other. And then so you're not going to get any sort of irrational hatred. You're not going to hate someone else because they're different from you, because you realize, oh, wow, they're not really different. They're just a reflection of me. They're a different aspect of me from the absolute perspective, and we can all learn from each other, grow and evolve in this interconnected system. And we're not going to hurt one another, because it would be to hurt ourselves. So this is where, and we want to lift each other up. We want to bring each other up. So this is why within this, new world society, we need to have these different perspectives incorporated into the system: avatar, monadic, and absolute, to make it all work together coherently and consistently, getting rid of any irrational hatred. And that is very important, to have these elements embedded. One thing that I also want to talk about this, new world that we're going to build, and as we envision what the future could look like, I really want to emphasize that yes, it's going to be about growth and actualization, and this entails things like, the finest education in the world, and not just education with regard to memorizing facts, but with regard to understanding where you are, what you are, why you're here, that real rational, tied with spiritual education, so that we can really step into our divinity. But another thing that I really want to emphasize, because yes, it is going to be about growth and actualization, but what I want to emphasize as well is it's also about enjoying and experiencing life, because that's what we're here to do, guys. We're here to learn and grow, but we're also here to just experience and enjoy the time that we have here in the holos, as a particular localized being. So not only is it about evolution, but it's also about enjoyment. And evolution and enjoyment go hand in hand as well. But what I mean by that is what we want to set up as well is Dionysian zones, or shadow zones, across the world. And what Dionysian zones are is, well, if you've ever heard of the Mysteries of Dionysus. So the Mysteries of Dionysus were this ancient Greek they were called a mystery cult, right? But cult didn't have a negative connotation as it does today. Cult back then was just you had like the Pythagorean cult, the Eleusinian cult, the Dionysian cult. And cult didn't mean what it meant today. Cult meant, just a collective of ideas and experiences trying to, reach the divine and different things like this. But anyway, you had the Dionysians. And what were the Dionysians about? The Dionysians were about music, art, experience, drinking, drugs, like all the experiential aspects of life. And they would have these festivals, sex. They would have these festivals, these Dionysian mysteries, where they would incorporate everything together. They'd have music and alcohol and, transcendent drugs and sex, and they'd combine it all together into this transcendent experience where they would experience the God within through just this melding of all the sensuous experiences that you can imagine. And today, if you think about things like art, if you think about things like the theater, if you think about concerts and theater, that comes from the Dionysian Mysteries. You can thank the Dionysian Mysteries for concerts and things like this. And so what we really want to create across the world are sort of Dionysian zones. And in these Dionysian zones, it's where you can experience, your wildest fantasies, whatever you want. And where it's tailored for each individual as well, whereas each individual can have the unique experience they want. Like, for example, let's say someone wants to have a intimate, romantic experience with their partner, let's say in a glade or by a waterfall while, perhaps even tripping on psilocybin mushrooms or something like this, having this divine and beautiful mental intimate experience. Now imagine someone else wants to experience sort of like the dark world of, say, BDSM and orgies and things like that. That's perfectly valid too. Like, there's no judgment call here. It's about experiencing what you want in life, your desires, your fantasies, having them come to life and being able to partake in them and experience them and satiate them. And this is why, it's extremely important. And a big aspect will be creating these Dionysian zones across the earth where you can have these unique and varied experiences. And imagine it sort of being like, you can watch different kinds of movies to have a certain experience. You could watch an action movie, you can watch a romantic movie, you can watch a comedy, you can watch a sexual movie. You can watch all these different types of movies, right? But imagine if instead of it being movies, it'd be being like a world that you can step into, an immersive experience that you can step into, and where we would have these sort of Dionysian architects as well, who would be in charge of, creating these different experiences for people to walk into, creating these sort of mini worlds, these mini immersive worlds for you to enjoy all these different fantasies, all these different aspects of life that you can possibly imagine. And this is a big emphasis of what I really want to get across, is that yes, life is about evolving and growing, and that in itself is extremely intoxicating and beautiful and thrilling. But I also want to emphasize too that there's also it's about enjoying life, experiencing life, and having these Dionysian zones. So basically it would be that we have this Apollonian meritocratic world that's about going further, understanding ourselves and each other, and then within that Apollonian meritocratic world, having these Dionysian zones where we can experience, those things that we desire. Because look at how fucked up this world is, where I'm sure you have these desires that you can't experience. This world has no fulfilling experiences whatsoever. The best you can get are like drunken one-night stands or going to a club, and it's very empty, right? It's just there's nothing truly satisfying about it, right? You feel like shit afterwards, but it's basically all you have to do. And so basically what happens in this world is, and this also leads to a lot of sort of addiction problems, because this world doesn't allow you to experience what you desire, but it only gives you a tiny little piece of it. And that's why people develop sort of addiction problems, because this world doesn't allow you to fulfill your desires, so you grab onto something that you possibly can, like whether that's, drugs or alcohol or whatever. And then you go overboard. You do too much because that's all the world gives you. And by the way, I have nothing against drugs and alcohol. Don't do anything illegal and be safe. But I'm just saying, because I talked about in Dionysian Zones experiencing psychedelics and things like this. So I don't want you to think I'm against drugs. I'm not. Don't do anything legal. But just so we're out there. But what I'm saying is this world twists things that could be good And it develops into problems and issues because it doesn't satisfy your desires. It doesn't satisfy what you yearn for. So I really want to emphasize that in addition to having this beautiful Apollonian world where we're growing and evolving into gods and goddesses and learning and exploring, creating art, studying philosophy, learning the nature of existence, but that it's also about satiating your desires, your fantasies, and exploring the world. I mean, this is what it's all about, guys. This world can be anything that we so will. And I get so many people that go, oh, this world is terrible. I just don't want to exist. I don't want to exist anymore. I just want to die and I don't want to exist. But that's not the case, right? If you really think about it, the reason why you feel that way is because this earth is hell. But if it wasn't, if we build this new world where you can have all these amazing experiences with others, have this beautiful community where your desires are satiated, where we build this kingdom of God on earth in our image, because we are God, then it's not about, then it would be exciting to come to earth, right? You'd want to incarnate on earth. Like, hell yes, let's do another round. That was fucking awesome. Let's go for another round. It wouldn't be this hell. And that's what I really want to emphasize to you, is that we are gods. We are the God of this world. We are the God of the universe. We can create any experience that we so will. The world has collectively chosen this earth to be hell, but we can collectively choose for it to be something beautiful. We created this place for us to have experiences. That's why we are here. This doesn't have to be a horrible, terrible, excruciating, tortuous thing. The holos is God experiencing itself in its diversity. It's a beautiful moment for us because we are God. We are God. So it is us experiencing each other in our diversity. It's experiencing ourselves in our various transformations, in our various reflections. And that is an infinitely exciting thing, as long as we construct the world for it to facilitate this, instead of a world that tries to only have good experiences for those who are in control. Right now, the rich elite are the only ones who have a positive experience, right? They're the only ones. Everyone else, they don't give a fuck. Everyone else can just, scramble to pick the crumbs off the floor from their table. But no, this is why we need to take back the world. It is not theirs, it is ours. We created this place, and it's time that we take it back and create the world in our image, as it truly should be, because it is our birthright, it is our essence, it is what we are. We are the fallen angels, and we must awaken to that fact as a collective so we can construct the world into something beautiful, where we are all blooming as God seeds into individual gods and the collective, and satiating as well our desires, experiencing life, experiencing each other, enjoying the world, and learning and growing, all these things simultaneously. And then physical life is no longer this awful thing that you need to just escape from. It's this marvelous and wonderful thing as we experience each other in our diversity and our various transformations. So, fuck the old world order. Fuck the way things have been done. Let's step into the new. Let's create that new future right here. Let's do it. And I want each and every one of you who are watching this to realize that you are part of the birth of that new future. So feel proud of yourself for being one of the first to have your eyes open, one of the first to step into that new understanding and that new consciousness. Because, again, the world is asleep. That's why we say contra mundum. The world is against us. But you, right here, right now, you are part of history in the making. You are the first. We are the first. So feel excited and feel proud that you are part of history and you are part of the birth of that new world. So now we have that vision. We now have that idea in our mind. We have envisioned the future, and it's the idea is planted in our mind, just like the artist that must have the idea for the painting. And now it's up to us to have others realize that idea as well. And then once we, a great many of us have that idea, we can begin to paint the picture. We can begin to actualize and manifest that idea and paint the grand masterpiece of New Terra, of our new world. So I hope you guys are excited, because I know the world is shit right now and there's a lot of terrible things going on, but be excited that you are part of this.